before we get into all the diversification and so on, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your grandfather, as you would have mentioned that the company is named after, and growing up and how the company was formed and so.
Right. Well, my grandfather grew up on an island on the Esquibo coast called Tiger Island, sometimes referred to as Hamburg. And together with his four brothers, they got into business, mostly rice farming, and also a little bit of shopkeeping. And over the years, they divided up the operation. So one brother ended up in the Wakenham Island, one brother ended up at was Golden Fleece Village. So he ended up in Affiance with his family, and that's how the family business here in Affiance started, Imam Bacchus and Sons Limited. Um, at the moment, he is no longer alive with us. He died back in 1970 something. But his two sons, who are still running the company, along with his grandchildren. So the family business continues. We started out as a rice business. And then sometime in the 60s, we had a little shop going. And there was a lot of strife in those days. The Governor General needed to distribute commodities to Essequibo at a time when there was a general strike going on. And the people of Essequibo said to the Governor General, well, we need you to give it to someone we trust who will distribute these goods to the public in a fair way, and we trust that he won't be stealing or hoarding or anything. So they asked him to give the concession to my grandfather. So we got into the business of distributing the government's commodities to people in Essequibo. And once the emergency was over and that contract went away, obviously people could travel and buy goods freely again. But we saw the possibility of going into that business ourselves. So we started up a general store selling flour, rice, and those things. And that's how we got into the supermarket business at present. Sometime in the 80s, there was a gentleman here in Essequibo who started in the chow mein business. And he sold that to us because we saw the possibility of it. Or I wouldn't say we, the generation above me, before me. They saw the possibility in it. So what they did was they bought him out, they bought his equipment, they brought him on board to be the manager, and we started our chow mein factory there. So nowadays we have a chow mein factory that's expanded a lot since then. We've modernized it also since then. And we got into chicken at some point as well, because chicken is an easy industry to see a need for, because you can't bring chickens from Georgetown very easily. So locally grown chicken is an industry that was calling out for somebody to get into it. And our operation started out pretty much like others, but we kind of grew very fast. So I think we are now the biggest chicken meat bird operator in Essequibo Coast.
Great. Can you tell me a little bit of how growing up was for you in terms of being in the shadows of your father, your grandfather, seeing them doing business?
Well, my grandfather died before I was born, unfortunately. So I never met him. But he casts a long shadow. The man, there are so many stories about him, and people will say you have to be like your grandfather, or your grandfather did it this way, you can't change the way you did it. So in that way, he was a presence. And me personally, they named me after him. His name was Imam Bacchus, my first name is Imam, to carry that name. And he had a reputation as a very moral man. Didn't drink, he prayed regularly, very honest. So that's a lot of pressure on you as a child, you have to carry your name forward, but you also have to carry those qualities forward. But I'll tell you a story about my grandfather that I think is very important. He worked as a coconut picker as a young man. He was illiterate. He would pick coconuts in the afternoon, and in the mornings he worked as a tailor. This was before he and his brothers got into the rice business. And he saved his money. He was very scrupulous about that. But he never learned to read as a young man. Even after he became a businessman and a shopkeeper, he could do his maths, but he couldn't read. And when he was 50 years old, he decided, you know what, I have to read. So he went out, he got a teacher, and at age 50, he learned to read. And by the time he died, 20 years later, he had his own library of books, and he had read all of them. and his children are all very good readers, and his grandchildren are all good readers. In fact, I'm one of his grandchildren, and I'm an author of books. And I feel that even though he did not have that opportunity as a young person to read or to learn to read, he always understood the power of literacy. And he went out and he achieved that. So that's one of the reasons we have this, we're sitting here in the library that our company sponsors. And for me, thinking back to my grandfather and that shadow he cast, the idea of keeping literacy alive in the community is important to me. And that's why we've called this library the Imam Bacchus Library, and we continue to promote it within the community. As far as the shadow of my father, my grandfather had a big shadow. My father did not cast a big shadow, and I'll tell you why. My father is a very capable man. But all the time growing up, I had complete access to what he was doing. So if he was, for example, upgrading the rice factory, I would be standing there by his side while it was going on. I mean, I would go to school, I would come home, and then I would walk up to where the construction site was, and I would stand next to him, and every question I had, he would tell me what was happening. Every decision he made, he would explain why he was making it. So growing up, they didn't feel like there was a shadow. I felt like we were like almost equals, even though I was a 10-year-old boy and he was a 30-year-old man.
Okay. So in terms of your siblings, it is how many of you?
Well, it's hard to count that way because my father and my uncle are the two sons of my grandfather who continue to run the business.
Okay.
And they have 7 children between them.
Okay.
And we treat each other as siblings, even though technically we're cousins.
Okay.
So I would say there are 7 of us.
7 of us.
3 on my father's side, 4 on my uncle's side.
Okay.
I'm the oldest child from my father. I have a brother and a sister. My brother also works in the company. In fact, he probably does the most work. Out of everybody, my father has kind of given up a lot of the responsibilities because my brother has taken them on. He has more ideas that are different and so on. You want to pass that along. My sister does not live in Guyana. Of my 4 cousins, one of them lives here in Guyana, and he is also part of the company.
Do you feel, before we get into just you explain a little bit more about the library and the playground that you have for the community, do you feel the love from the Essequiboans that you have stayed in Essequibo, you continue to support in terms of the economy in Essequibo, you continue to diversify, you didn't just cut and run? Because I'm sure the process would have not have been easy in terms of where you are now.
It's a hard question to answer because it's hard to separate the business from the personal in Essequibo. So when you were asking me how do they view you as a business and your role in the community, most people will not view us as a business. Most people in the community view us as a family. And they relate to us on the level of a person, not as a company. So for example, the crop is going on. Farmers are coming to you to sell you their paddy. Those negotiations often feel like a dinner table conversation. You know, there's not in an office where people stand and I'm over here, you are over there. Well, sir, I think I will be offering you. It's nothing like that. You walk in and it's very casual and it's like, so how things? Or you ask about the family, and the negotiation and the relationship between the people in the company and the people in the community is very informal and casual and close. And it works because we are a small community, so it has to work that way. And yeah, I feel the love. I think this is a community where everybody looks out for each other. And it's hard to, if you wanted to avoid it, you probably couldn't. If you wanted to live, you know, as a hermit, it would probably be very hard.
Because everybody loves one another, there is the love, there is the respect.
And there's probably, you know, some people who think, well, I think I have too many people in my business because this country life, you know, everybody knows what you're doing. But if you're okay with that, then it's a very comfortable way to live in that your neighbors are always there.
On that same note, in terms of family and the country life. For a person coming from Georgetown, so Essex for the first time, like I am,
Right.
how would you describe the experience to them? Or what should they expect? What should they enjoy? Visiting this beautiful country.
Well, it's a quiet life, and there's a reason a lot of our young people don't stick around because they want the excitement that they'll find in some place like Georgetown. And there's a lot of issues. I won't, try to tell you it's a perfect life. We are a community that has social issues in terms of suicide and alcohol use, a few things like that. But it's also a community where you can take it very easy and relax. It's not a stressful life in terms of the action. I'll put that aside for now. Yeah, so it's not a stressful life in terms of you live life at a slower pace, and it's quiet. Quiet is a word I use a lot for it. And if you like quiet, then that's good. It's also a good place to live if you like food, or at least if you like country food. A lot of the traditional food, it still is very vibrant in the life here. When I go to Georgetown, what I find is a lot of people have moved on from the old style of cooking, so there's a lot more modern food. And Georgetown has all these restaurants, and you can get Italian food and whatever. But in terms of old style Guyana cooking, whether you're talking about Afro-Guyanese or Indo-Guyanese, you can get that here.
Well, I think I will actually stay for that part, the food. Coming back to the library, you would have mentioned you are, I can tell that you're a lover of books, children books, you love to tell stories, as you would have mentioned. How has the library benefited the community in terms of the improvement of literacy among the community members?
Well, it's hard to gauge directly because obviously we're not testing anybody. Right. But we try to intervene in the worst case scenarios. So there have been times where we've reached out to the schools and worked with them and said, who are the people in your school or the students who are having the hardest time with literacy? And we run programs for those students specifically. But what we've mostly attempted to do here is be a kind of an enrichment base. So we have activities like our Saturday story time, where we'll have anything from 20 to 40, sometimes more. Children will come in, and they will sit down and listen to stories being told. And the idea behind that is to give them that appreciation of books. A lot of the times, the problem with literacy, or the problem with getting children to be more literate, is that they don't see the benefit or the enjoyment in a book. And there are various reasons for that. But the solution is that you want to give them this book in a positive experience, a fun experience, where they start to think, hey, this is as fun as watching a movie, or it's as fun as playing a video game. I enjoyed the process. I felt close to the people around me. So you do it in a group where the children bond with each other over a story. They discuss the story with each other. And the environment in which everything takes place is wholesome and stress-free. So usually because of that, we'll incorporate a lot of art, sometimes some music, into this story time, so that it feels like something more than just reading a book. And of course, the other thing you do is you have all these books on the shelves, and it's available for them to come borrow. And that's a second stage, because what happens is a lot of the time is a child who likes to read, like the child I used to be. When you read all the books in your own house, where do you go? And I would go to other people's houses and say, okay, well, I have finished this book. You lend me this book, I'll lend you that book. But there was very little in terms of a place where I can go and find a whole bunch of books. I ended up going to school in Georgetown for high school. And the school library there was full of books. I enjoyed that. And there were other libraries, private and public, and I used to go to all of them and borrow books. And it was so much different from living in Essequibo to living in Georgetown because of that access to books. And as I mentioned, living in Essequibo is not a perfect life. One of the things you'll find in Essequibo is you're deprived of a few niceties. For example, if I want to see a movie in a movie theater nowadays, I have to take a trip to Georgetown. But the library is meant to say to the Essequibo children, you can have this too. And we do get that. So the children who like to read will come here once every week, once every 2 weeks, borrow a new book, take it home, read it, and come back. And that gives them that place to continue their love of books if they already like reading. So as you can see, it's a two-stage approach. Get them to like reading, and if they like reading, make sure they have the material so that they could feed that love of reading.
As part of your social duty as well, apart from the library, under the company, you also have a recreational park for the community where kids can come every afternoon, or basically for families in the
Yes.
afternoon if you just want to relax and, bring the kids out, let them run a little, so when they get home, they can probably just shower them and they go straight to bed.
The entire complex where Imam Bacchus is was a rice plant, a sugar plantation. And I'm talking about the whole thing, not just the park.
Not
Yes.
just the park, okay.
And when they converted to rice, they installed a rice mill in 1925 or so. And that was a big engine because it was an old-fashioned engine made by a company called Tangi out of England. And there was a huge wheel that was part of that engine. And when they switched the rice factory to a more modern engine in 1965, my grandfather did that. The old Tangi engine got scrapped. It was basically thrown in the bushes, along with this really big wheel that was part of it. So now that we have the park set up, we've taken that wheel and we've installed it as a little bit of a historic monument, a little bit of an artistic piece, and it sits there in the middle of the park as a little reminder of where we came from, but also as a little plaything for children to climb on top. They love it. Well, the park itself was an empty lot for a while, and the company didn't have any particular plans to develop it. We looked at some possibilities, some commercial use, but we didn't have the budget to develop it in any way. So as a temporary plan, we said, let's just grow some grass, flatten it out, put some equipment for play park, and leave it there for a while until we decide what we really would do with it. And after a couple of years, we were looking at the park and we thought to ourselves, we really like this park. It's really useful to the community. It's useful to us as a business. And by that, I mean, people come to the park and the park is right next door to your business. What you've basically done is drawn people to your business. So it's useful in that sense as well. So we developed the park. We put a few dollars into it. We have it maintained by a crew every 2 weeks. So it's a lot of work to keep it maintained. We have electricity run there, and we have concrete to maintain, things to paint, fence is made of wood, we have to maintain the wooden fence. But we look out at it, and this company has reached its 4th generation. My grandfather started it, and he has great-grandchildren now, who are children. They're between the age of, say, 4 and 5 and 10. And these great-grandchildren of his play in the park that we built. And, I think if he was to look back at us now, he would say, well, yeah, keep that going, because I like to see my great-grandchildren that play.
In terms of the business, coming back to the business, you're doing rice?
Yes.
You have brown, parboiled, you have white, you have the chow mein, which is very tasty.
Thank you.
Very, very tasty. Are there plans in the making? I'm sure you probably just at the drawing board or so for expansion. Presently, the government is pushing for diversification, not just in the public sector, but private businesses through diversification as well. Are you going along that lines, or thinking along that lines, let's say for the next 5 years or so?
We always think of diversification. I mentioned how we got into the chow mein business in the first place, how we got into the supermarket business. So we have never been a business that is happy to just stick to rice. We love rice, it's our main business, but there are other opportunities. You don't want to put yourself in a vulnerability where the rice market gets a little shake and all of a sudden you're looking at a disaster. And there have been years where we've been really glad because there are times when one aspect of your business doesn't do well because of the conditions of that year, but the other aspects of your business have pulled through for you, and it makes sure you have a smoother ride. We don't have any specific plans at the moment for any diversification, but we're always open to the opportunities, and we're always experimenting in little things. And sometimes you just dip your foot into it. So there's been a time, say about 15, 20 years ago, we started to roast and package coffee, and we would source our coffee beans from the Pomeroon River area. And we at one point were supplying coffee to the restaurants in Georgetown. All the restaurants, major restaurants in Georgetown that you could think of, were buying our coffee to serve to customers. And it seemed like something that had some legs, or I should say. But then the coffee production in Pomeroon dropped, and we had to pull back out of that business. But what that illustrates is that we're always looking at these openings. You start out small, it grows. If it doesn't go all the way as you wanted, well, then you pull back and you try something new. But you never stop with trying new things.
And in terms of trying new things also, you have the planting that we would have gotten to see in terms of your celery, the time.
Oh, well, that's actually not very new. That's going back to the days of my grandfather again. We had a lot, this was when he bought it, an old estate, so there was a lot of land. And not all of it was under rice cultivation. And some of it was just open and unsuitable for rice. It wasn't prepared as a rice field. And you could just leave it to be bush, or you could put it to some use. So he and my grandmother generally put it to use as agricultural land for household produce, your cucumbers and your what we call in Guyana balange, okra and that kind of thing. And I suspect my grandmother kept it alive a lot because she loved the whole industry. She would be out there in the garden from morning to afternoon, and her favorite part is at the end of the harvest time, you would lay out all your goods there, all your produce, and it's sitting on a big stand. Well, this is what we picked today, and she would look over it and she would have this big smile. She really enjoyed that. Nowadays, we don't have as much of the land under produce because we've expanded. We've put in things like chicken farms, and we've expanded the rice facilities. So that land is not available. But what land is available, we do continue that tradition of growing vegetables. And we have a full-time crew that works on that. And the vegetables that we grow ourselves, that's used in our supermarket. We sell that in our supermarket.
Finally, how important it is for fellow Guyanese to support their fellow Guyanese, and to put it that way, to keep the industry, to keep the economy going. We would have had a chat that, the same, if you were to take products from Guyana now and hold it up to the international ones, they're so good that you won't be able to tell which one is foreign or which one is local.
Right.
So, your thoughts?
Well, we rely on the local market for our sales. We're not big exporters. And we do export some of our chow mein, but the people who we export to are Guyanese living in Miami and New York and Toronto. So it's still local sales in a sense. It's the people who learn to love our chow mein in Guyana. When they migrate, they still want to have it. Are we willing to give it to them? So we see the need for local support. We are a local industry. Our employees are all Esquivans, and they benefit from our sales through their salaries, and it keeps them going as well. So I should also add that we see this as a two-way street. Because if you say that the local customers must or should support the local producers, then it's also very fair to say the local producers must make sure that what they give the local customers is a good quality product. And we take that responsibility very seriously. We always make sure we have a quality product. we always make sure that the price we offer it at is competitive. We want to make sure that there's value in what we offer. So the commitment is there on our side as well, and we would like to see the response now from the public. Well, if I'm giving you something worthwhile, look at it, give it a fair shot. You know, don't buy it because it's local alone. Buy it because it's a well-made local product, and I think you'll be happy with what you get.
Well, Ms. Dash, thank you so much once again for sitting down with us. We're enjoying your hospitality. Continue to do the great work in terms of your social responsibility to your community and to the people of Essequibo. And we wish you much success in terms of your business and keeping your grandfather's tradition and qualities that you have to live up to. Have to live up to the life.
You're very welcome.